Very recently, the Supreme Court converted a conviction of rape into fornication. One of the reasons for dismissing the rape allegation was that the victim showed no visible signs of resistance. And in the past, where the victim was a woman and was a non-virgin, the courts used painfully intrusive language such as habituated to sexual intercourse, woman of loose character, woman of easy virtue. There's a significant gap between the law and the implementation of the law. I'm Rida Hosain. I'm your host for DawnNews English's Case in Point, where we talk about laws, their scope, and how they impact us. Today, we're going to talk about rape laws in Pakistan. Convictions in cases of rape and sexual violence are abysmally low. Victims must have faith in a system if they are to approach that system. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, our system is plagued by issues such as flawed prosecutions, gender stereotypes, which are deeply embedded within the system, and ineffective implementation of existing laws. Now, under Pakistan law, what is rape? Under Section 375 of the Pakistan Penal Code, rape is when a person has sexual intercourse with another person against their will and without their consent. The core element in any rape case is the absence of consent. However, in certain cases where consent is obtained by putting the fear of death in a person or by hurting a person, this will not qualify as consent. Or if a person is of unsound mind, intoxicated, or not able to appreciate the consequences of the act, they will not be considered as capable of consenting. As far as minors are concerned, the law expressly states that sexual intercourse with a minor under the age of 16 will be classified as rape. This is a form of statutory rape in the law. Consent is irrelevant, and sexual intercourse with a minor under the age of 16 will be classified as rape. Now, as far as non-consensual sexual intercourse is concerned, what is consent? Consent means an unequivocal voluntary agreement. Consent must not be imputed, consent must not be assumed, and the courts in Pakistan have held that consent means an agreement with a free mind and a free will. And in addition to the Pakistan Penal Code, a special law was passed, the Anti-Rape Trial and Investigation Act of 2021. This aimed to provide expeditious and fast-track justice to rape victims and victims of sexual abuse. Special courts were to be established across the country to provide expeditious justice, and a 4-month period was also provided in the law for completion of trials. Anti-rape crisis cells were to be established, and when the anti-rape crisis cells received information about an offense, they were to ensure that a medical legal exam of the victim was conducted, any forensic examination or examinations are also conducted, and that an FIR is registered. In addition, the special law also protects victims and carves out certain protections for victims, including that the identity of a victim will not be disclosed without prior permission. And as far as investigations are concerned, a special sexual offences investigation unit was to be set up, and this special investigation unit was to have at least one female police officer. So we have the Pakistan Penal Code and the Anti-Rape Act of 2021, but let's talk about the implementation of these laws. In 2023, the Lahore High Court found that the Anti-Rape Act had not been fully implemented. The Special Sexual Offences Unit, which were to be established, had not been established in several districts. There's a significant gap between the law and the implementation of the law. Gender stereotypes and patriarchal attitudes continue to persist within our system and even in the highest court of the land. Very recently, the Supreme Court converted a conviction of rape into fornication. One of the reasons for dismissing the rape allegation was that the victim showed no visible signs of resistance. The majority found that since the man in this case was not armed and did not have a weapon, a woman that was not a consenting party would offer resistance, and there would be resistance marks on her body to establish this. Justice Aisha Malik was the only female judge on the bench, and she dissented from this judgment and identified expert studies which showed that rape victims have different responses: fight, flight, freeze. In the case of a freeze response, the victim goes into a state of involuntary paralysis and is not able to respond or to react. and the majority judgment looks at rape from a masculine lens and invalidates the lived experience of women. Gender-sensitive language must also be used in judgments, and in the past, where the victim was a woman and was a non-virgin, the courts used painfully intrusive language such as habituated to sexual intercourse, woman of loose character, woman of easy virtue. The Supreme Court, in a judgment authored by Justice Mansoor Ali Shah, has now held that the courts must discontinue the use of such painfully intrusive and insensitive language. Yet we see that such insensitive language is used, and this mindset continues to persist. In line with the using gender-sensitive language, the concept underpinning some of our earlier jurisprudence was that if a rape victim had consented to sexual intercourse in the past, they would be likely to consent with anyone. One of the factors considered in cases of rape was a victim's sexual history. The courts were effectively judging rape cases from a moral purity lens and deciding which victims were worthy of the court's protection and which victims were not worthy of the court's protection. The Supreme Court has now held that a victim's sexual history is irrelevant in cases of rape. And finally, victims have to encounter victim-blaming attitudes in the investigation process. Questions are asked, especially in the case of a female victim. What was she doing there? Why was she there? And we shift the onus onto the victim and put the victim on trial. And victim-blaming attitudes have to be changed both at a societal level and also within our judicial system. To address these challenges, there must be an increase in female representation in the judiciary. The latest report by the Law and Justice Commission of Pakistan shows that only 7 out of 126 judges in the superior courts are women. Lived experience matters in decision making, and the lived experience of nearly half the population cannot be excluded. Special laws such as the Anti-Rape Act of 2021 must be implemented in letter and in spirit, and there needs to be a shift in judicial and societal attitudes. Gender sensitization training of judges is absolutely essential, and the system cannot continue the way that it currently is.